Hello everyone and welcome to the next one in our winter webinar series. I'm Lara Bands, the lead archaeologist for the East Kent Coast Discovery Programme, and for this webinar we're hosting Tanya Venture, who's currently undertaking research for her collaborative doctoral partnership at the University of Exeter with Historic England, and some of you might remember her from her former role in SCAPE, or Scotland's Coastal Heritage at Risk project. She's going to be talking on loss. We're really looking forward to this one. Before we start, a little bit of housekeeping. You're muted and we can't see you. You'll know where your fire exits and your toilets are. And I can hear a really loud noise and I'm not sure if anyone else can. So I'll wait for that really loud noise to stop, and it stopped. And yeah, so it just remains to say, if you've got a question, stick it in the question box and I'll pull them out at the end so we can ask Tanya them. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Tanya.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for having me speak today. Yeah, my name's Tanya Venture and I'm going to start I guess this year off by talking about loss. Hooray, what a cheery start to 2021. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about a framework that I've been developing throughout my PhD work that's due to be published as part of the journal for the Historic Environment Policy and Practice in their climate change special edition. So this is due to come out later this year, hopefully. And the framework is about how we as heritage professionals talk about and understand loss and how we can do this better to help inform more positive action when it comes to dealing with the inevitable loss and change of heritage assets on the coast. So hopefully it won't be too much of a depressing start. So I'll start by giving you a bit of a background to how this framework came around, before talking in a bit more detail about the framework itself, the themes, and then I'll finish up with a bit about the importance of flexibility and fluidity when navigating these themes. So as I said before, all of the work that I'm presenting on today has been developed as part of an ongoing PhD project, which, as Lara said, is a collaborative doctoral partnership between the University of Exeter and Historic England. So just before we start properly, I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of my supervisors who represent both the University of Exeter and Historic England, who have helped me shape this work through their continued support and really in what has been a very challenging and unusual year. So just to give you a bit of a background to myself, before starting the PhD in September 2018, I worked as an archaeologist and filmmaker for the SCAPE Trust, who research, investigate, interpret and promote the archaeology of Scotland's coasts. With them, I was able to make a few videos, and I got first-hand experience working with communities on the coast, working with and on vulnerable sites, and really developed a practical filmmaking skills that I continue to use as part of my current work. So working with the SCAPE team, working with SCAPE and being part of the team with Tom, Joe and Ellie has personally influenced me a great deal and continues to do so. So to understand the catalyst for this framework, let's jump straight in, or rather back to the Sea of Change conference in Blackpool in 2019. What a simpler time. Specifically a talk given by Dr. Caitlin Vertigan, who spoke passionately and emotionally about the anxiety that both her and her colleagues feel about managing the heritage site at Port Arthur in Australia that is being increasingly threatened by climate change. She spoke about the seemingly monumental decision she felt she was facing and the apprehension in how to proceed that led to a lack of definitive decision-making. The concerns surrounding the implications of potential mismanagement created a great deal of anxiety, leading to indecision, which in itself is a decision of inaction. So I hope that wasn't a bit too convoluted. And this talk really resonated with me and the work that I've been doing looking at sites on the Lizard in Cornwall as part of my PhD project. So these feelings of apprehension, anxiety and indecision that translate to a breakdown of communication between heritage professionals and the wider public, almost seeding a sense of mistrust. And this tension is even felt within single organisations. With heritage agencies already stretched, there can become a disconnect between managers on the ground and upper management, especially when it comes to difficult subjects like loss. And managing the loss of heritage is becoming an increasingly important subject. So we know as heritage professionals that our links with the past are incredibly important to all of us, whether that's links with large national sites like Stonehenge, or maybe more personal aspects of heritage, maybe something physical that you have, or a local bit of coastline. Protecting heritage really looks at what is important enough for us to want to hand on to future generations. It can provide comfort in times of crisis, enter into ideas of community, identity, sense of place. It has proved time and time again to be a very powerful motivator for action, for both good and bad. And we all have places. Hi.
Sorry, Tanya, we're just going to have to pop in and mute you and unmute you because there's a bit of a weird buzz going on. Sorry to sort of flow.
That's okay. Is it better? Ooh.
Is it better now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect. I think it was just a weird connection issue with my headphones. I look like an air traffic controller, but yeah, they
Cool.
didn't seem to be very good.
Cool.
Okay, so
Thank you. Sorry. Bye-bye.
so we all have places or things from our past that are important to us now and that we want to continue in some form into the future. And I want everyone to just take a few seconds to think about a piece of your own heritage to keep in the back of your mind throughout this presentation. Oops. For myself, I tend to think about not a coastal site, but my grandmother's house in Somerset, which this rather creepy Victorian photograph is quite nicely highlighting. So my grandmother's house has changed massively in the time that it has been in my family. I've only ever seen a very small part of it, the bit that's left. It's seen a lot of personal family moments, and it's somewhere that I consider I've grown up in. So for me, this would be my personal heritage anchor. And I think it's important to have an anchor when thinking about the loss of heritage, as it is an emotional subject. And I don't want the question of accepting loss to become some sort of sterile academic question or just a policy issue, but have it stay at its core an emotive and personal subject. The emotional impact of loss shouldn't be overlooked. Compassion and empathy are invaluable tools when engaging with emotive subjects such as this. And we know that change is coming. It's happening right now. I mean, 2020 was the biggest change that I've ever seen in my lifetime, and I hope to ever see again. And we know that with climate change as well, change will be happening at an unprecedented rate. It will mean warmer, drier summers and warmer, wetter winters, as well as an increase in relative sea level rise, ocean acidification, as well as many other aspects, all of which will have an impact on heritage. In 2013, Historic England commissioned the Atkins report, which concluded that the effects of climate change will have a massive impact on heritage through exacerbating already natural processes, making them more extreme and less predictable. The Atkins report also highlighted that, in addition to climate change, human action through mismanagement and maladaptation can also have disastrous effects on heritage, in some cases more so than the initial effects of climate change itself. In 2017, in the 2017 paper, Predicting and Adapting to Climate Challenges, it states the effects of climate change will be felt by all types of heritage, from built to buried, and as well as the historic context in which the assets sit. Within historic England, there's been a shift in policy from mitigation towards sustainable adaptation. Significantly, a specific need to discuss the management of inevitable change and loss, which reflects a wider need to accept that the climate is changing and work with these changes rather than against them. And this involves specifically addressing loss. But is loss something to be afraid of? Changes on our coast have led to important discoveries, new opportunities for community engagement, as well as new ways of framing complex and important issues. Archaeological investigation in the form of excavation is inherently a destructive one, so there are many opportunities afforded by loss. In fact, there are several projects that work on the coast with vulnerable heritage, prioritising and updating archaeological data and also engaging with communities. An example being the SHARP project, which updated the rapid coastal zone assessment data with the help of citizen scientists and a specialist app, while also engaging in a range of archaeological investigative projects on a number of sites around Scotland. Citizen science projects like SHARP, like Citizen, and like Cherish are exploring those opportunities and have been extremely successful, though this innovation hasn't yet been carried through effectively into decision-making contexts. So areas where the shoreline management plan suggests no active intervention, there is still no clear framework for engaging with people on what that means for their local landscape or how to navigate that change. And this is where my work is situated, in this post-prioritization space. What happens when there is no more recording to be done and assets cannot be saved? More importantly, how does the heritage sector communicate that seeming finality internally as well as outwardly, considering that the idea of loss is often seen as something so huge and so final that it's almost impossible to grasp, let alone deal with proactively. So the aim of this framework is not to outline a rigid set of rules for approaching loss, but instead to look at loss from a different angle, breaking down the perception of loss as a large, unmanageable problem and breaking it down into smaller, more manageable chunks so that it can be understood in more depth and detail and then applied to the context of specific places and conditions. The idea of loss is quite often an abstract term, and there's no common language or framework used to describe it and therefore tackle it adequately. This framework aims to break down what loss means so that different kinds of heritage transformation likely to be experienced in the coastal landscape can be articulated clearly and dealt with confidently. Ultimately, giving practitioners the tools needed to engage in healthy and productive dialogues within the heritage sector and outward to the wider public. Conversely, the aim is not how to stop loss, but in fact how to lose better. So the basis of this framework really came from my first case study site, which was a stretch of coast on the Lizard in Cornwall. Along that stretch of coastline, there are several key sites in that landscape, all of which are experiencing different types of change and loss. So the middle image there is the Marconi Monument. And if you stand there, you can see it being very, very gradually squashed between the coastal edge, which is always kind of coming in, and the field boundary just behind where that man is standing. And in that field, there are the remains of the largely invisible structures of the wireless transmission towers that the monument itself is celebrating. If you travel north, you come to this tiny little medieval church, the Church of the Storms, and it's kind of nestled into the side of this Iron Age promontory fort, which is becoming increasingly cut off from the mainland and turning into an island, radically changing that landscape. The farm buildings just behind that are looking to adapt to this change, retaining their historic importance while serving as an important resource for the community, with plans for a local museum, which will involve measures that allow the building to adapt to the encroaching sea. And if you travel south from the Marconi Monument, you come to Mullion Harbour and to Mullion Cove and the harbour, which in response to pressures of sea level rise and increasing repair and maintenance costs is facing inevitable change. So from working on this stretch of coastline, I identified 4 main themes of loss, which form as the basis for this framework. So invisible, adaptive, inevitable, and radical. And I'll talk about each theme in a little bit more detail. So inevitable loss engages with previously unnoticed or overlooked heritage and explores the loss of the unknown as well as the potential release of value through the process of discovery and recognition. So invisible loss might relate to a site that we cannot physically see, or it may relate to a site that we can't access, so potentially it might be on private land. It might be visible and accessible, but its significance is not widely known. All of these factors would count towards a site being counted as invisible. The scale and significance of sites related to this theme are highly variable, ranging from discrete find spots consisting maybe of a few potsherds to potentially entire structures such as that discovered at Must Farm. Sites that fall under this theme have huge potential, though they may not have an associated support group from either the community or academia or the profession, so they remain incredibly vulnerable. An example of an invisible site would be the Haysborough footprints. So this site was previously completely unknown. It was uncovered in a storm. 2 weeks later, the same storm, well, probably not the exact same storm, but a storm destroyed it. But in that time, there was enough work done that has changed our understanding of the Pleistocene. It's therefore an incredibly important site. So the potential of this site and others that fall under this theme are how the values of that site change, or in fact, how the values can be released when the invisible becomes visible. So when this occurs, values associated with these sites evolve accordingly. If the change takes place rapidly, then there's less time for more complex, maybe more embedded human relationships to form with the site. And in some ways, that can make it easier to conceptualize and eventually accept loss and transformation of that site into a different state. These sites are also accompanied by sort of the joy of discovery, which in some ways can mitigate the negativity around loss, especially if appropriate action is seen to be taken. So the second theme is adaptive loss, and adaptive loss recognises the transformational nature of a place and allows for continued evolution of form and function into new iterations with potential support from external sources. So because adaptation may be most appropriate for maybe a small portion of a much larger or complex site, this theme is likely to run at the same time, or is likely to interact or overlap with one or more of the other themes. So the rate of change experienced at adaptive sites and opportunities for responding creatively will be highly dependent on aspects such as funding or community or academic interest. Levels of uncertainty associated with adaptive loss can fluctuate massively between high and low as funding or interest is secured or even lost. Importantly, this theme may attract attention from funders outside of the heritage profession, which was the case at Burnbeck Pier. So built in 1867, the pier has had a turbulent history, eventually closing to the public in 1994. However, with the creation of a passionate community group, Friends of the Old Pier Society, as well as support from Historic England, as well as the RNLI, the decision was made to reinstate the small section of the pier that was a lifeboat station. and reinstate that as a lifeboat station again in 2020. So one good thing happened in 2020 at least. Although the site as a whole won't go back to being the Victorian pleasure promenade that it once was, some part of its historic legacy will continue. And this theme specifically concentrates on the negotiation of values and interests between different groups whose needs need to be managed carefully and must be built on a foundation of genuine engagement and mutual respect. It encourages challenging the static nature of understanding heritage sites and opens up new perspectives on future change. An adaptive loss approach that embraces and engages with gradual transformation will ideally unfold over an extended time frame, giving people the opportunity to understand and process that change as it happens and adapt responses accordingly. So actively engaging with sites creates a sense of ownership and therefore legitimacy, allowing communities to take control of their own story. However, this can only be achieved successfully through effective and well-resourced community engagement strategies. The next theme is inevitable loss. An inevitable loss involves the loss of heritage over an extended time period and provides opportunities for renegotiation of cultural and social relationships. So inevitable, as the name implies, relates to loss that cannot be stopped. It may take the form of slow or incremental damage and may be followed by periods of extensive structural loss. This will eventually affect all aspects of site management, especially where aspects of public safety and site access become a concern. So the changes associated with this theme can happen rapidly, as seemingly stable sites may transition very suddenly into the inevitable loss, maybe perhaps almost overnight through large storm events, say. Conversely, the rate of change associated with this kind of loss may also happen slowly, in some cases far longer than a single human lifespan. So the Hearst Castle, which is pictured here, is an example of inevitable loss. So after storm damage in 2019, the seaward wall was undercut, leading to a partial collapse. Though it was repaired, it is very likely that this area will be an ongoing vulnerability and eventually contribute to its eventual loss, though not for a long time. Perception of action is incredibly important to this theme. In particular, as acceptance of incremental change can be easily mistaken for inaction, especially if there is a surge in either community or academic interest into the site in question, which generates new values and perhaps sparks efforts to arrest or slow change. This can lead to uncertainty, which creates feelings of anxiety and perhaps might create a divide between groups who want to see the site saved and potentially groups who encourage the acceptance of change. However, this theme can mean more opportunity for investigation and directing community enthusiasm in a healthy way. Though these sites may exhibit increased vulnerability, they can also mean an increase in potential. Sites that experience inevitable loss offer a great opportunity for hands-on engagement, more so than is possible at more stable and non-threatened sites. So projects such as SHARP, Citizen, and Cherish are key examples in how knowledge and engagement with communities on vulnerable sites like these can help lead to great discoveries. Through embracing positive opportunities relating to the management of archaeological heritage impacted by this theme, we can change the question from how to mitigate loss we can change the question from how to mitigate loss to one of how to accept loss. And the last theme is radical. And radical loss requires the consideration of future histories associated with landscape scale change and incorporates the loss of both heritage and non-heritage assets. So radical loss encompasses loss that takes place on a landscape rather than a site-specific scale. It can include the loss of infrastructure and housing as well as heritage. So the village of Fairbourne in Wales is an example of this, of a place that's currently undergoing radical loss. It's being called in national newspapers the site of Britain's first climate change refugees, after the decision was to move to a no active intervention was published in 2019. The rate of loss and change at these sites may seem slow compared to what has been previously discussed, but change is likely to follow a pattern of punctuated equilibrium, generations of apparent stability, followed by sudden rapid change. If these changes are approached with the long view in mind, there may be opportunity to adopt forward-thinking and innovative plans for dealing with loss, in effect building the anticipation of and preparation for eventual loss in from the very beginning of the process, rather than just seeing it as an end. In one sense, radical loss may be seen as the terminal point of all the themes discussed, but that does not mean it's devoid of opportunity, and it does not mean it is a true end. Exploring the value of what will be left behind and the need to consider the creation of future histories becomes more important with this theme than ever. So radical loss and forward-thinking, future-orientated planning allows for opportunities to develop future narratives which embrace change. Narratives around relocation, for example, can help smooth transitions to new places and make them more meaningful. As we previously covered, heritage can be a very powerful tool, and through utilising this alongside active engagement, could, if handled well, become a cathartic experience, allowing people to process this complex and emotive issue. Through acts of remembering, forgetting, communicating, and negotiating our relationship with heritage, a shared identity can be created and expressed or recreated. Respecting the power of communities to act on and vocalize their values acknowledges their collective agency and avoids categorizing them as helpless victims. The aim then, with regard to both inevitable and radical loss, is to help people cope with absence and open themselves to the discovery of new presences in that place, both tangible and intangible. As people become more aware of the changing environment, adapting and accepting the inevitability of even radical change and loss will become more important than ever. So these themes, as they're presented in this talk, are designed to be flexible, sort of flowing in and out of one another. There's no sort of hard barrier between them. The distinction between each is a fluid one, and importantly, different people will perceive these themes differently. So my characterization of any of these sites to one or maybe two or three of these themes might be different to yours. The application of these themes, thematic descriptors, is not intended to be prescriptive, but instead accepts the blurring of boundaries and the value of non-linear, open-ended conversation. So ultimately, this framework isn't designed to tell you what to think or what to do about loss in a rigid, hard way. It is designed as a catalyst for reassessing our relationship with loss and embracing the plurality, sorry, I can never pronounce that word, of heritage as an ever-evolving phenomenon. So there we go. Perfect.
Both of us. Oh, that was great. That was really, really interesting. Thank you very much. So I'm going to pop out the questions and see what people have come up with. I'm going to ask you a question though, first of all, because this is something you didn't cover, but I'm interested in. And it's a question about methodology. I remember, I mean, you employed some really brilliant filmmaking and really successfully with SCHARP. So I wondered if you're planning on using filmmaking as part of your research process for this PhD.
Yeah, so actually that's really the crux of my PhD research. It's looking at specifically interactive documentaries and their role in in I guess conversations around loss. So the framework is designed to open up dialogues between heritage professionals and the wider public, but also between heritage and professionals. And I guess the natural kind of evolution from that would be looking at how interactive documentaries and filmmaking can further open up those dialogues, maybe try and look at, again, looking at loss from a different angle. It's such an emotive subject that I think sometimes it's easy to get stuck into a point of view, and you kind of almost need to be nudged a little bit. So the point of an interactive documentary is to turn you, I guess, from a passive watcher of a film to an active participant. So you'd actually be clicking on what you want to see, and then opening up other pathways and learning more about different people's points of view. And so part of my research is looking at is that actually a useful way of dealing with it. But yeah, I'm going to use as much filmmaking as I can do. I think it's a really useful technique.
Yeah, excellent. I think we learned a lot on our project from watching some of your films, and anyone who's listening, I would definitely suggest that you look up Tanya's films, because some fantastic action movies on coastal heritage. So first off, we have a comment rather than a question. We're prepared for this, and this is from Citizen Project Manager Caroline Barry Smith, and she says, amazing backdrop of post-it notes.
Thank you. Yeah, so this actually would be a good example of trying to break down that large problem into small manageable chunks, because at the moment this is my thesis. It doesn't look too terrifying. I don't know, maybe it looks more terrifying like this. I think it looks a bit better than it just being write all of these words. But yeah, thank you. I'm very pro post-it notes.
Cool. And I've got some other questions coming in. I won't say who they're from, because I don't know about the etiquette on that. Actually, I should have thought about that. So we've got a question. First question is, who or what organisation decides on the applied loss status that are outlined?
So the applied loss statuses. So things like whether sites are protected or not. That would be whether sites are scheduled or anything like that. That would be Historic England, I think. Sorry, that's
wondering if they're meaning that the ones that you've come up with, like the transformative,
oh, I see.
adaptive, possibly.
Yeah. So so basically these themes are it's kind of up to you, actually. It's up to everyone. These are kind of 4 rough themes that I've sort of seen repeatedly come up during either my career and also by looking at this this site on the lizard. But I'm not here to tell you that specifically these are the only 4, or that, you know, this means exactly this. Like I said, these are the boundaries between these are supposed to be blurred. I think it is too easy to get stuck into another way of listing and organizing, and instead of actually doing so by saying I don't want to spend a whole paper exactly finding out where the boundaries between these 2 things are. You have to do it yourself, because, you know, in the end you're going to be the ones navigating this. It frees up mental space to react to things, rather than just spend the next decade arguing about what exactly the framework is. I guess in a way I've made a framework that doesn't really work as a framework. So
excellent. That's always good.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in following your research. I'm really excited about this. Okay, so there's another question come in. Is have you come across the theoretical work on loss by Adrian Davis, a PhD that was completed about 7 years ago?
No, I haven't. I haven't heard his name, actually. Theoretical loss. I've just got my notes out here. If you could, I mean, I'll put my email address, and I'm happy to be contacted at a later date by anyone. But I'd love to read that. Then that would be fantastic.
Okay, and then we've got another one. Well, it's another one, but it's 2. How positive can loss be? Do the advantages of loss ever outweigh the disadvantages in terms of heritage? Big question.
That is a big question. I am an optimist, so yes. The thing is with with heritage loss, in lots of cases, it's going to happen whether we like it or not, especially with loss on the coast. There is no way of controlling controlling the coastline. We are going to have to deal with loss. It's a fact. So really, how we deal with that is controllable. That is something we can control. And I guess my project is looking at how do we get the most out of loss if it's going to happen, and how do we break out of that cycle maybe of thinking that loss is wholly a bad thing and almost getting paralyzed by that thought, and instead maybe shaking out of that and saying it's whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter, it's going to happen, so we might as well do what we can and be proactive about it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's something we've found across our project, and I'm sure you found across SCAPE as well, is that there's nearly always something to discover when there's loss. I mean, you know, really obvious one is the Beltooth shaft that was completely, you know, the cliff fell away and revealed a 40-meter shaft that no one ever knew existed. Those kinds of ideas.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, and there are huge opportunities by any, I mean, like, loss is just change, and change is incredibly exciting, and it gives you the opportunity to investigate something that you might not have seen, but also engage more with your local history. So maybe you've never thought about getting involved in local history until something comes up, something does get discovered, and then that's a positive opportunity there.
Cool. Excellent. Right, got another one in. Going back to the Adrian Davis, the theoretical loss, it was University of Wales, Trinity St David that it came out of.
Awesome.
Cool. Okay, so got another couple of questions. This one says, thank you, Tanya. Sorry, thank you, Tanya. Super interesting talk. And they say, I was wondering if you thought that the lens you've developed for looking at loss could be used as an impetus for climate change action, as well as being used to learn to accept change. Great question.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. Yeah, hopefully. I think when we break down the problem of loss and change, it's a lot more universal, and it can be applied to a lot more things than just heritage. So I'm hopefully some of the things that will be coming out of this research will be applicable in the same way that heritage is incredibly useful for climate change dialogues and discussions going forward. So the Climate Change Heritage Network, the Climate Heritage Network creation and things like that. You know, these are not small, these are not kind of discrete boxes. It's everything's kind of flowing in and out of one another, and I think we have a lot to learn about change. Realistically, the last year has been a huge change. So even, you know, our understanding of concepts such as uncertainty, risk, those things will forever be changed for us, anyone living now, and that's a strange thing to consider.
Yeah, interesting times to be looking at loss in. Actually, that feeds quite nicely into this next question. Do you think this framework could be helpful in trying to understand how people in the past also dealt with loss and changing landscapes they existed in?
Oh, that's a great question. I haven't thought about that, actually. That's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, like, I guess actually loss and change, actually. I mean, I keep saying loss, but it really is just change. It's always been around, and we know from like places like Dunwich and things like that that have undertaken massive amounts of change. That, you know, people will have had to deal with it. So God, yeah, that's really interesting. I don't know, I can't answer that yet, but that's really cool.
Good one to think about. Right, okay, and another, which, because I was listening to you, I haven't read fully through, so, and it's quite a long one, but it's a really interesting presentation. Many thanks to you. Where might you place loss to coastal heritage assets that is being caused by non-heritage decisions rather than environmental change? Shall I read you the whole question, then I can go back and read the first half if you need it again? Human responses to climate change can have a bigger impact on coastal archaeology than climate change, such as climate-driven redevelopment, managed realignment, etc. And they suggest perhaps radical adaptive. Yeah, so the first bit was, where might you place loss to coastal heritage assets that's being caused by non-heritage decisions rather than environmental change?
Yeah, I think definitely it's easier to conceptualize and to accept loss and change when it comes from a natural kind of focus point than a man-made one. At least with the man-made loss, you do have a someone human to be angry at and direct that anger at, whereas it's a bit kind of doesn't really work very well if you're just doing it out of the sea. But I would say the flip point of that is that if it is man-made, we do have very good commercial archaeology in this country, and specifically with the polluter pays principle. We have a way of getting in there and recording any kind of archaeological heritage before it is lost or if it is damaged. The problem then is that with nature there is no polluter, so we don't have access to that I guess financial resource. So in a way, even though the natural is more easy to accept, it's actually a lot more damaging than human made damage, I guess. And then was there a second part to that question? I like the adaptive, radical adaptive. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. It says human responses to climate change can have a bigger impact on coastal archaeology than climate change, e.g. climate-driven redevelopment, managed realignment. So I think it was qualifying there.
Ah, cool. Well, I hope that's answered your question. Yeah, I hope I've answered any of your questions.
And another one in. This sounds like a very short, easy question, but but maybe not. Are there any easy ways to explain that loss is inevitable to local communities?
Ooh, that is a good one. That's a really good one. So, as part of my PhD project, the actual practical data gathering part of the project, which has been slightly messed around due to COVID, sort of started later last year, and it's kind of continuing on right now. I get to interview community members about a new case study site. Just talking to them about how they conceptualize loss and heritage, and if it's important to them, what is important to them, and how do they kind of accept that. And I think a lot of people do have this kind of duality in their mind. They accept loss, they know it's natural, it's always going to change, nothing ever stays the same, but at the same time they do want to keep things the same. And I think that I think that it's a case of not being scared to talk to people about things that might upset them, because really people are quite rational, and even if you do end up getting this kind of maybe first emotive response, which can be quite angry or sad or another kind of uneasy emotion, people will have time, they will process that, and they will start engaging kind of more of a logical thought process after that. So I don't think there's an easy way of talking to communities about loss. I think it's very individualistic. It depends on the site and it depends on the person. But I do think that is a conversation that we shouldn't shy away from, because I think shying away from it again creates this sense of anxiety. And realistically, that's what we're trying to get away from. So the framework here is not specifically to say that if you follow this, nothing unexpected will ever happen, but it is meant to try and free up your mental headspace, sort of like this mental load, so that you can react when things need reaction and you're not always reacting.
Yeah, I think there's actually sort of there's a kind of a commenty question that's come out of that one, and it says that the person saying sort of in their experience as well that people get upset when sites are going to be lost, but they tend to only get to that point of being upset when a site is far too damaged to then do anything about. So I suppose that's another question. Well, sort of a question from me is how do we motivate communities before loss has happened? And I suppose that's leads into some of the things you were saying. So get people interested before loss has happened, so we can not do something to lose it, to stop sites being lost, but to begin to be able to record sites before they're already half lost, or for
Yeah,
example?
I think recording sites before they get to that point is definitely excellent. And also, you know, unfortunately, by drawing attention to sites sometimes as well, you do give that site value, and then maybe people who wouldn't have cared otherwise are like, no, this actually is my favorite place now. And I think a big part of that is when you're dealing with sites that are going to have a future that is involved in loss or transformation in a major way, is being really upfront with that in the beginning, and maybe not kind of, I guess, so what I've seen is that a lot of breakdown occurs when between heritage professionals and the public, when there's some element of mistrust gets put in there, and it's absolutely not meant to be there on the part of either one of them, but normally it's like, okay, this thing's going ahead, we've all decided, we've had this big talk about it, we're going to go forward and do this, and then for whatever reason something in the background goes wrong, and it seems like the heritage, maybe professionals of the heritage sector, is not doing something that it should be, and that puts people on the back foot, and they're like, but why are they doing this? This could mean anything. And it's like, no, it's fine. It's just basically, it's just about keeping communication lines like super clear and just very transparent. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and I think that's a good one. It's good to end on communities. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was great. I'm really super interesting. Really looking forward to continuing. Where are you in your research? Are you about, how far are you into your research?
So I'm in my third year now. I just started my third year in September.
Wow.
But with probably about 9 months or so behind realistically. I've only just been able to, in the last couple of months, get out to do my field work because of everything that's gone on and everything. So I'm about just over halfway, I think. But
Cool.
there should be the interactive documentary will be made this year and made available publicly online. So hopefully, yeah, if anyone is interested in keeping up to date with my research,
Yeah.
you'll get to play on that soon.
Excellent.
Tell me
Oh,
what
let
you
us
think.
know, and yeah, and we can share across our network as well, because I'm sure loads of our volunteers will be really interested in that. Okay, so thank you very much.